Hi everyone, it's Gary Nicholson here for the Mountain Weather Information Service. This is your planning outlook on Sunday the 20th of October. Now we've seen the first, shall we say, meaningful snow across the mountains this weekend. The Cairngorm Plateau looking all white on Sunday afternoon from some of the pictures that we've seen. That chilly air will stay in place as we start the new week. It will be pushed away as southwesterlies come in through the middle of the week. Temperatures generally above freezing. Gale force winds and some rain, though, will come back in from the Atlantic. It becomes a messy picture later in the week. I suspect temperatures will come down again for a time at least. The risk, though, of some heavy rain moving up from the southwest. Let's jump straight into the charts then for the new week. And for Monday, high pressure is building a ridge from the west, and it's a quiet day to start the new week. We've got the remnants of previous weather systems pulling away to the southeast, but low pressure is still creating a strong northeasterly wind across Pennine areas and initially across Wales earlier in the day. Those winds will drop lighter as the ridge of higher pressure builds in, but will then strengthen across northwest Scotland as the southwesterly wind arrives in this part of the world, which will see some thickening cloud and maybe some spits and spots of rain onto the far northwest coast through the afternoon into the evening time. Temperatures will be staying around freezing point across the highest mountains. There'll be a hard frost in many Scottish glens in particular first thing on Monday morning. And a frost is possible across the valleys of England and Wales for Tuesday morning as the winds are light here, some mist and fog patches around. It's a stronger wind, though, that is across Scotland, and that southwesterly through Tuesday will be up to gale force and will be quite variable across the Scottish mountains. It might not be that it's at its strongest on the very highest tops. There'll be some very powerful gusts getting through some of the passes and the cols. It's essentially a classic stable southwesterly flow where we've got an elevated inversion above the mountains squeezing the air over the tops of the plateaus, and in some places that squeezes it through some of those narrower passes. There'll be some rain coming on to the west and northwestern coastal mountains, pretty persistent through the day across the northwest Highlands, smaller amounts toward Loch Lomond and Arran, and hardly anything more than spits and spots in the wind across the eastern side of the Highlands, and it stays dry broadly across the hills of England and Wales. Similar stable south to southwesterly is in charge on Wednesday. There's fronts draped around the western fringes of the British Isles. The risk of those just encroaching further in to give some heavy falls of rain across areas from about Mull to Skye through the course of Wednesday. That may get in further for wet conditions across many western Scottish mountains through the day. Very little again toward the eastern side of the Highlands and largely dry for England and Wales, but just need to watch this small complication spinning up from the south, which may produce some drizzly rain for south and southeast Wales and perhaps even the Peak District later on if it can get far enough. A windy day again across many mountains, especially across the Highlands, with the risk of gale force winds and again gusty through the passes and into some cols. Now, temperatures will have been above freezing then through the middle of the week, but just as these fronts then swing their way through and turn the airflow back towards the northwesterly, so temperatures and freezing levels will drop again. Need to watch the timing of that, but I suspect we go back below freezing as we go through Thursday. Various zones of rain and showers passing southeastwards. There may be some heavy bursts for a time, but also some drier and brighter intervals too. It looks wettest still across western Scotland, facing the west by northwest wind, which could still be up to gale force for a good part of the day. The absolute timing and detail of who gets what at what point of the day on Thursday is up for grabs, but expect a fairly unsettled and increasingly cool day, especially across the Scottish mountains. Now, confidence of absolute detail is low by the end of the week, but this is the risk. This is a zone of low pressure that's trying to come up from the southwest, forming within a waving frontal system, and that's got the potential for some heavy falls of rain. Now, that looks like it focuses itself on Ireland and Wales. It may well move further northwards as time goes on, so one to watch later in the week. If that does develop, there's the scope for some very heavy rainfall for some places. If it doesn't get, say, as far north as Scotland, then Scotland could do pretty well for staying in cool, chilly conditions with some showers and some sunshine. So there may be some winners and losers again in this sort of situation. If that low moves in, though, heavy rain and gales will need to be in the forecast, so watch for that one. Now, if I just show you where that develops from, just to knock things back on this bigger picture chart through the week, this is the middle of the week, and it's essentially a little feature that develops well out over the Atlantic, almost across as far as Newfoundland, and that goes southwards, that eventually develops a zone of low pressure around the Azores. And it's that that deepens through into the second half of the week, and it's the wriggling weather front on that zone of low pressure that starts to come in from the southwest as that whole pattern just amplifies itself by the end of this week. Very tricky then exactly where we go through into the weekend and even beyond. We're really at a bit of a crossroads of weather patterns at this stage. There's quite a zone of high pressure which will be around the Iceland region and around Greenland, and the zone of high pressure across central parts of Europe. There's low pressure around Scandinavia, there's low pressure towards our southwest, and we're rather stuck in the middle, and getting the absolute sequence beyond that then is rather tricky at this stage. Many indications are starting to come around to the idea of the higher pressure systems winning out in the final few days of October. This is a suggestion then. This is around the change of the month, the 7-day pressure anomaly from one of the forecast models, and it shows that zone of higher than average pressures. This is at middle layers in the atmosphere. It gives us a general steer for where surface patterns can go to. And the idea of high pressure parked around Iceland would feed the airflow toward the British Isles generally around from Scandinavia. Now, some of that might be cold air that originates around from the Arctic, being dragged around and then pulled back across us as maybe an east or even a southeasterly wind that steers across the British Isles. If some of that air gets drawn a bit more around from the Atlantic and Iberia, then there's a chance for being a bit milder, but many indications actually favour the chillier source of air that comes around originally from the east and northeast through into the final days of October. It may be that if the high extends in, we become substantially dry over a few days, but there's quite a bit that has to go on before we get this exact pattern nailed down, but that's the general trend, that's more or less where high pressure is going to be centred. Quite how we get to that point in terms of the sequence through the upcoming weekend, well, that is somewhat more tricky. So watch this space, I suppose. We'll keep up to date with developments. I'll update the video for you through the middle of the week with the weekend outlook. And of course, you can stay up to date with all your local forecasts every day on our website. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.